everyone, you're watching Money Control. I'm Sakshi Batra, and this is a very special webinar on unlocking growth with City Business. City Business Solutions are helping empower the micro and small businesses by offering business banking products and services to really help maximize their business potential. City Business One World and City Business Leap are tailored solutions curated for every growth phase and to fit the banking needs of Indian subsidiaries of MNCs as well as of startups as well. Now, often referred to as the backbone of Indian economy, the micro, small, and the medium enterprises have actually been struggling amidst the onslaught of COVID-19, with millions of businesses across different sectors seeing extensive economic devastation. And now the sector, which already has been under stress even before the pandemic, with challenges such as delayed payments, of overdependence on a few customers, and also of the lack of, say, skilled workforce. The pandemic, on top of it, has really dealt a very heavy blow on this sector, and particularly the MSMEs. And the big challenge which follows now is of survival. And as an important part of the domestic and global value chains, the plight of MSMEs is of really deep concern currently. For the MSME sector, the crisis has really called for an approach that necessitates enhanced efficiencies and also accelerates modernization. And in a way, we can say that COVID-19 is actually a watershed moment that may actually lend itself to accelerated business transition for India's vast MSME sector. In this special webinar today, I'm joined by leading experts who will share their valuable insights about challenges and opportunities in this MSME sector space and how businesses can really pivot to growth by unlocking new avenues. Joining in today is Mr. Vinod Kumar, Honorable President, India SME Forum and Managing Partner and Country Manager, India and Middle East, SDRC International. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Sakshi. Pleasure to be here.
Also, I am joined by Mr. Anant Narayan. He's the Senior India Analyst, Observatory Group LLC, and Associate Professor, SP Jain Institute of Management and Research. Welcome, sir. Thank you very much for taking our time for us.
Thank you, Sakshi. Thank you, Moneycontrol and Citi for having us.
It's our pleasure, sir. Today, we will also be open to taking audience questions, and you can send them in the comments below for our team to really pick up and share with us so that we can include it in our webinar, in our discussions in between, and also later on after we finish up our discussions. You can direct it to both of our panelists and also share with us any kind of suggestions that you would have with us for us on Money Control as to what kind of webinars you would want to see in future as well. But let's start with today's discussion topic. To begin with, I wish to ask you, Mr. Kumar, first, what according to you have been the biggest challenges faced by the MSMEs during the pandemic, and are really things better now with the peak behind us and the economy really unlocking itself?
Well, actually, we've all been through a very, very tough time, and that's true for anybody. It's not just about small enterprises, it's been about everybody in the agriculture sector, those who are working, those who've been out of jobs. So COVID has been a bit of a speed breaker for most of us. Why we say that? What has happened with the MSMEs, if you look at primarily, you have a certain percentage of MSMEs which are primarily, with what we call as a death rate, wherein a certain number of MSMEs are born every year or formed every year, and then some of them actually die out a natural death over a period of time. But if you look at the figures this year, what most of us will be shocked to know is that the death rate in MSMEs has gone up to almost 58%, from a normal 38-35%, which it used to be. Now, which is a little bit alarming because a lot of SMEs have actually shut down their businesses because they don't see in the near future some way of actually being able to come back to business. So that's at the outset. The second thing is that when the entire COVID pandemic stuck, what has come out of it is primarily disruptions in supply chain, disruptions in labor, disruptions as far as the market is concerned, as far as the demand is concerned. And all of these combined have made a situation very, very tough for SMEs, especially in the services sector. Because if you look at the services sector, they've been able to do absolutely nothing when it comes to hospitality, when it comes to entertainment industry, so many industries that we all are aware of. At the same time, what I feel is whatever the government has done in order to be able to push some way of creating more demand, some way of actually empowering these MSMEs with financing, it has worked to a certain extent. But my feeling is a lot more could have been done. But as a country, we're all prepared to take on whatever. And then as humans, we are all pushing every day for survival. And it's finally the survival of the fittest. And that is precisely what is going to happen with the MSMEs also. Only the fittest will.
Absolutely, Mr. Kumar. Thank you for your opening thoughts. Mr. Narayan, could you also add to those bits, about the challenges and especially the alarming rates of figures that Mr. Kumar has really shared? This is also, very shocking to me because I haven't come across this figure as of yet, that 58% of the sector is already, on the verge or already shut down. So if you see that, that is an alarming figure. Plus, what are the factors which can drive growth from this point onwards and revive these small businesses?
Well, thanks again, Sakshi, and excellent comments from Mr. Kumar, and I endorse them completely. Look, this has been a body blow to a already weak economy in many ways, and therefore it's no surprise that MSMEs, which form a bulk of our employment opportunities and our businesses, have been hit pretty badly. Look at it this way, Sakshi. Once the lockdown started, barely 35-36% of the economy was operating from about 25th of March onwards. Of course, we have seen opening up, and thankfully now we are back to about 95% of the overall economy. But for a large period of time, we've had big chunks of demand, big chunks of consumption, big chunks of economic activity just shutting down. That's going to have an impact on businesses. Now, I'm always cagey about talking about MSMEs as one unit, because it's not a homogeneous unit, right? It's 63 million disparate units. Obviously, there are some sections within that which are actually doing well. For instance, some bits of healthcare, some bits of diagnostics and chemicals and pharma are actually doing well. But the point is, and as Mr. Kumar said, the really micro people and the nano kind of businesses have been hit really hard, far more than the more established businesses. So you can't have a broad brush approach and give a one prescription. But the fact is, demand has got hit very, very bad. So clearly for many MSMEs, this is, as you rightly said in the beginning, about survival. Those that have survived, including with the measures that came in from the government, etc., they have actually crossed a big hump already. Things hopefully will get better from here in an organic fashion. Once you've done the survival, there will be opportunities in multiple ways. As Mr. Kumar alluded, a lot of MSMEs have shut down. Now, if you're a fresh entrepreneur, it's a great opportunity to step. I'm on the board of a few MSMEs, one MSME actually. I can tell you that a lot of suppliers to that company have shut shop. So we're actually going around trying to figure out where we can source new supplies from. So restarting businesses and getting those supplies back into order does present opportunities. Second, the ways in which we all do business are going to change. The way in which we buy, the way in which we consume, the way in which we sell, we meet people, everything is changing. Now, entrepreneurs are people who can figure out which way the winds are headed. And therefore, if you are an entrepreneur who's smart enough to see which way your business is headed, and every business, by the way, is changing, there are opportunities there as well. The last bit in terms of opportunities, besides the government now being extremely keen to try and give jobs and output in this Atmanirbhar Bharat, a big fillip, the global environment is also actually in a funny way very supportive. Globally, there is no growth. Globally, people are not finding investment returns at all, right? There is, aging population. There is most of the returns on fixed income has become zero returns. So in that sense, there is a lot of money waiting to come into Indian and other entrepreneur hands. India is a beacon of growth and hope of growth, right? To that extent, we do have an opportunity of getting in those monies and investments and know-hows, but it's going to be a long and arduous, road. Make no mistake, this is not going to fall into our lap. The pain is not yet over. We have taken a body blow. The pain is not over by any means. And in order to take advantage of the government as well as the external environment, a lot has to happen, both at an individual level as well as a collective level. But hope is there. I mean, we live on hope.
All right, so India is a beacon of hope, but going forward from here, long and arduous journey. The pain is not over yet. Those are the opening comments. Mr. Kumar, we've been seeing that the current situation, especially of the pandemic, which has forced organizations to really have a relook at their digital strategies. Have you seen that MSMEs have realized the significance of technology adoption, and that is for survival and not just for lowering of costs, and that is during the pandemic?
Absolutely, Sakshi. You're not on. In fact, what Anand talked about is completely, what I can see on the ground. Um, Last 2 years, India SME Forum as an organization has been trying to push this agenda of digital enablement, primarily only for the purpose that most of our micro and small enterprises sort of stay out of touch with technology, with changing mechanisms in the marketplace, with changing consumer habits, and so on and so forth, and which finally leads them to a point wherein they face a challenge in survival. They face a challenge in somebody else coming up and saying, I am going to compete with you and I'm going to push you out of business. Now, in the past 2 years, whatever we've done, let me share with all of you what has happened in the last 8 months. All of these guys have come back to us and said, can you now help us? Because we don't know what the hell we missed. We know you were talking about it all this time, but now it's the time. And let me share with all my friends here that digital enablement, transitioning from a normal business into a digitally enabled business, is the only way you can future-proof your organization. You have to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to enabling your supply chain, enabling your distribution networks, enabling your customer orientation, the feedback mechanism, the complaint mechanism, all of that. And that's the only way an entrepreneur can stay on top of the business. Most of the times what I find is most entrepreneurs in India don't even conduct diagnostics on their own enterprise to know whether what they are doing is in the right direction or not. Such simple things, which thankfully what I find now is in the last 8 or 9 months, a lot of entrepreneurs are getting into this, and they're getting into this with full focus, saying that we'll get out of this on the other side with an enterprise which is completely digitally enabled. And that is where I have a very, very good hope that we're going to have this mechanism which is going to push a lot of MSMEs out on the other side, of this entire pandemic and this entire disaster that we've been facing so far with flying colors.
Absolutely. So embracing digitization is the way forward, and that is how you future-proof your business. That's what Mr. Kumar is of the view. Mr. Narayan, what would you think that which are the areas emerging as top technology investment priorities for, say, MSMEs? And has it given an edge to some of the MSMEs? Have you noticed you just said that you're on board of one MSME. Have you seen any of those developments on that front?
I endorse again what Mr. Kumar said. I'll try and put this in two ways. Again, I'll start with the caveat. MSMEs is not one homogeneous group. There are several industries. There are several sizes, different geographies. So it is a very, very complicated ecosystem. But nevertheless, two areas that I would focus on. One, what Mr. Kumar referred to, which is the way in which you conduct business, right? So for instance, if you're a Kirana shop and you're finding that people are preferring dealing with an Amazon or a Flipkart or e-commerce in general for lower costs, for better service, for better returns, and so on and so forth. If you can't beat them, join them, right? So you have to integrate yourself in as part of that ecosystem and make that transition to ensure that, as Mr. Kumar said, you future-proof your business. And likewise, this would apply for all kinds of businesses, not just for trading outfits, etc. The second part, which I think is extremely important, is formalization. Now, here is one lesson which all MSMEs have to learn. Why is it that, despite so much of liquidity in the banking system, despite so much of money in the global ecosystem, that money coming down to MSMEs is such a challenge that the government has to step in and say, I provide a guarantee, and then the money starts to flow in, right? The fact is there is a trust deficit amongst all financial institutions about lending to businesses. People don't trust your balance sheets. People don't trust your governance. People don't trust the way you do businesses. And that has to be earned. And here, with all of the stuff happening around us, with GST payments, with UPI, with all the banking getting digitized at a very frenetic pace, there is a great opportunity for you to come absolutely clean, get good governance into your ecosystem, get good board members, get good auditors, and make sure every single cash flow going through the system is there for people to see. Nothing is about, under the table, or, nothing is funny happening in your business. I can tell you that earning that trust will take time, but technology will enable you to ensure that people trust those numbers because you can show it on system. And once you've earned it over time, believe me, the dividends that you will reap will be extremely high. Money will come towards you, and you will also find a lot of people willing to collaborate with you, provide you with resources, financial as well as technology, to grow your business. I think one takeaway: formalize your businesses right away.
All right, so formalization is important, is the key for banks and institutions, financial institutions, to be really able to help you out in that sphere. Mr. Kumar, what do you think in that sphere then would be the key considerations of small business owners while incorporating technology and, say, while what Mr. Narayan said, while you're formalizing your businesses?
In fact, Anand hit the nail on the head. Most of the SMEs, you see, I'm also an investor in small, medium enterprises. So when I look at companies that approach me, primarily from the point of view of investing in their brick and mortar enterprises, what I figure out most of the time is that there's no way that I can depend on what their balance sheets show. And that is what each banker today is also wary of. Now, all the enterprises that have above board balance sheets, that have above board tax payments, that have above board compliance and all the other things, do not find it difficult, and I repeat, do not find it difficult to attract money at all levels, whether it is from the banking sector, whether it is in terms of equity, for venture equity or seed money, or anything of that sort. The basic primary issue is that whenever we are setting up an operation, we tend to look at multiple reportings. We'll have one report which goes to the bank, there'll be another which goes to my customer, there'll be another which goes to my IT guy. So multiple reports. And this is what we've been against from day one, that, we cannot do business unless we are above board. And if you're not going to be above board, you're going to have a tough time. Because either you're overstating what you're actually doing, or you're understating what you're actually doing. Either ways, the banker does not have trust on you. Neither does the financer. So first and foremost, put in order a technology-based system which won't take away your time, which won't make you have to spend nights, curating the balance sheet and all that. Just talk about your business the way it is, but enable systems and processes in your business from day one. If you're able to do that, scaling up becomes extremely easy. You have one branch today, you can multiply to 5 branches overnight. And if you have world-class systems based on world-class technology, you can take that same branch and open it somewhere else, maybe in Indonesia, maybe in Malaysia, maybe somewhere else in the world. That is what the world is looking up to you. That is what is asked from you. That as a small, medium enterprise, unless you find continuous mechanisms for growing your business, creating sustainable options for revenue, you're not going to survive. And that is why I at the outset said that it is survival of the fittest. And for survival, you need to have a certain amount of systems and processes in your business.
Right. So, Mr. Narayan, I would want you to come in on that. Do you think then COVID-19 pandemic is also being seen as a catalyst for, say, MSMEs to revisit their supply chains or risk management strategies, and not just to adapt to this new normal, but also to innovate to be able to stay relevant?
I think COVID-19 has narrowed the choices to just one. You have to change now to survive. Earlier you had the option of trying to kick the can down the road and prolong the misery. Right now there is no choice. I mean, things have become so bad that we have to change. And I guess Mr. Kumar and I are singing from the same hymn sheet. On the specific company that I'm on the board of, that I mentioned, I won't mention the name, but I can tell you, they took me on as an independent director. I'm an extremely painful independent director. I ask 1,000 questions in the board meetings. The promoter, I'm sure, is wondering why the hell is he wasting his time answering those questions. But I can tell you it's worth it. If you have people who are doing a genuine job of questioning you, It's a pain in that short run, but it's really worth it in the long run. I have ensured that they get good auditors. I have ensured that they have professional consultants in areas like technology that Mr. Kumar mentioned, digitization, risk audits, things like, for instance, after the COVID-19, I mentioned we had supply constraints, making sure you have contingency plans in place, including if you have to replace imports from China, where do you go to? Having this in place will make life a lot easier for your growth ambitions. Already, we are seeing interest in this particular company of international large players willing to actually tie up at very favorable terms to the company to grow the business. So here is the upshot. Again, you cannot paint the whole thing with one brush. I know there are lots of differences between different types of companies, but if you have survived so far, and if you're looking good, or at least looking like, what about the next 5 years? Here is a quick takeaway. Please formalize. Please adopt what, we used to say that MNCs will say, I cannot pay you a bribe, I cannot do anything underhand, I will go by the letter of the law. For non-MNCs, you could always try and do certain things. Become an MNC, at least in the way you operate. Do not go outside of what the law is suggesting. Be as straight on the narrow path as possible. It's painful, but it's absolutely worth it in the new world that we are entering into.
Absolutely. So both of our panelists have actually put forth all the steps and the key measures all the SMEs need to take to be able to survive and to be able to thrive in the way forward in the post-COVID era. But external factors I'm going to come to now, which both of you have mentioned in your opening remarks as well. I'm going to be asking you about the help that the government has done so far. The 3.5 lakh crore rupees credit guarantee packages, what you've already talked about. I want to understand, as part of the Atmanirbhar package for the MSME industry, how has it been received by the industry so far? And then I would go on to asking you what more can be done to make this package more comprehensive and to be able to help them, in a targeted fashion. Starting with you, Mr. Kumar.
The Atmanirbhar package was very welcome step from the government, and had they not done it, you'd have been seeing a bloodbath on the roads as far as your enterprises are concerned, whether it's medium enterprises or small or micro. Now, so that was the need of the hour. Now, the first thing thereafter, what also happened is, I'd like to go to a couple of things which are little before this Atmanirbhar, and maybe a little before the government, this government, and also in the past governments. You see, if you look at the total number of enterprises, we talk about 6 crore odd enterprises. We also talk about the fact that, these 6 crore enterprises have been, part of the census maybe 3, 4, 5, maybe 8 years back. So essentially, you're talking about maybe 10 to 12 crore enterprises in this country. Now, if you look at those enterprises, and then you look at how many of these are oriented towards the international market. Let me share that you have today in India less than 35,000 exporters who are exporting products. So essentially, when you look at these numbers, you don't have export orientation at all. And on the other hand, what we found is in the last 2 decades, most enterprises that started even in the 80s or 90s, thereafter tend to actually go towards trading rather than manufacturing or doing any other thing. Now, what does that show you? It's much easier to import something into India than it is to export. So we still have a very, very long way to go when we are talking about, being on the global stage. We have so many FTAs with various countries and blocks around the world. But are we enabling this ease of export? For an enterprise today to become an importer does not take anything. You just need to be, registered with an IEC code, and thereafter you can just import whatever you want and sell to whoever you want. But if I was to export, I have 50 different steps which I have to take. I have to consider so many issues, and then I have to also deal with, bureaucracy and so, other steps at various levels. And finally, when it comes to, even getting my money back, from overseas, the banking system makes it so very difficult for me to actually operate as an exporter. That is why you found in the last couple of decades, Indians have turned to importing. Enterprises have turned to becoming traders rather than manufacturing, because it's the easiest thing to do. Now, that is what we need to primarily refocus on. And that's what we've been requesting the government also, that when it comes to looking at the imports vis-a-vis the exports, the government has very rightly actually looked at various imports now and is trying to curb imports. But we also need to look at how do we enable exports, and especially exports of those items that are completely labor intensive. So India is a place for manufacturing. If you look at, we do the best sculptures, we do the best woodwork, we do the best footwear, we do the best leather work. So why are we not the number one country in the world exporting? Because we are unable to enable clusters of these enterprises all over the country. Instead, what we are trying to focus on is, how to curb import from some country A or country B or country C. What we need to figure out is how do we build mechanisms of incorporating our small and medium enterprises, especially micro enterprises, craftsmen, clusters, into global value chains. So how we can, and those are extremely labor intensive, which means employment, which is one of the biggest issues that we have, that can be sorted out using this route very, very easily, because all these enterprises are primarily either in semi-rural or rural areas of India. So very, very clear possibilities. And let me also share here, Sakshi, that in the last 6 months, what I have seen, there's been huge numbers of inquiries that have been coming from the world over, not just primarily for exports of goods made in India, but also in terms of enterprises that they want to work with in India. So we've been actually looking at, trying to put together 4 or 5 enterprises that can discuss with somebody that is based in Canada or based in the UK or based in Europe and wanting to come to India to set up a base. And these are not very large enterprises. When you look at small enterprises from around the world, maybe 50 million or $100 million, they're not considered very large enterprises in their own countries. But all these enterprises are looking at what can we do with India. So how many enterprises in India are ready to even talk to them? That is the other big opportunity that I find. And not even the government. The government also is looking at very large enterprises. They want to bring in Apple and they want to bring everybody else. But who is looking after these small, medium enterprises from around the world, family-owned businesses who want to come to India? So that is there you are.
All right. So that was very comprehensively put, and we'll talk a little later in our discussion about the investment opportunities and the export growth opportunities that we see. But again, coming back to my question to Mr. Narayan, how significant do you think would be the impact of the measures already taken for the COVID hit MSMEs by the government, and what can be done to make them more comprehensive now?
I'll just add to what Mr. Kumar said, Sakshi. So let's break it up into 2 parts. One is, of course, the relief measures and how good have the relief measures been. And the second is the revival measures. How do we go forward from here, right? So on the relief measures, again, 2 parts. One is there's been people and household distress. Jobs have been lost. CMI data showed us that, there was a huge drop in employment in the months of April and May, right? It's now come back. Why is it come back? Good things have happened in terms of, for instance, the Mahatma Gandhi Narega plans going through. Of course, it has helped that rural agriculture has done reasonably well, and lots of rural areas were not impacted by COVID-19. 65% of India is still rural, by the way, so that kind of helps in a way. So, and the big thing to take care of household distress was, of course, the provision of food grains. 5 kgs of food grains, 1 kg of pulses every month. At least you don't have poverty. There are people who don't get access to that PDS, but by and large, there is a safety net available, which is great. I think while this dil mange more, at least in terms of some amount of that safety net has been provided. What has been disappointing is the safety net provided to businesses. Okay.
Yeah.
Of course, we have a constraint on how much fiscal room we have, etc., and we can keep arguing about this till the cows come home. But the measures there, including this credit guarantee scheme and fund of funds and so on and so forth, seem to be more attuned towards the lenders than the borrowers. You are taking care of the banking and the financial ecosystem than the borrowers.
Right.
If I'm having a distress as an MSME, if I don't have top line, if my bottom line has gone to negative because I'm paying salaries and rent and all of that, giving me a loan doesn't help. I need bottom line relief. That was not forthcoming in April, May, and June, and I think there we missed a trick. Giving interest subvention, for instance, for all MSMEs who have taken a loan would not have cost much. It would have cost us 0.5, 0.6% of GDP. I think it could have been done. But that's spilt milk kind of thing. I still think businesses that have paid, this is the point about digitization and formalization. If you've paid GST, if you've paid income taxes, if you are registered under the GST network, those people should have been given some benefits directly, so that they can in turn employ people and so on and so forth. I think that's one area. Now, more broader area is how do we come out from here? Fine, we've gone through what we've gone through. Death rates have gone up, but now hopefully we move forward. And this is a problem, Sakshi, that has permeated not just for the last 4-5 years, it's for the last 20 years. We've made a mess of trying to create jobs and output in India. Okay, the sectors which have done well, pharma, IT, etc., have done well despite government, not because of government. Okay, and this is across every political party. Doesn't matter. So I can very happily say this. Okay, no entrepreneur wants to set up a plant and employ 100, 200, 300 people for an export business or for domestic production, which explains why, despite India being a country which has 1/4 the per capita income of China, we are still importing tons of electronics. We are still importing tons of engineering goods, your plastics, your toys, chemicals, pharma, APIs. Everything is imported. There is no reason why we couldn't have done all this ourselves. The point, we made it extremely difficult over the years for entrepreneurs to set up businesses and to actually create employment in the country, which is why we still have 44% of this country's workforce in agriculture. It's not because people love agriculture. It's because there's no other job. And this agriculture just gives us 14-15% of our GDP, right? It's a complete waste. So here is the point going forward. Clearly, we've got to make it easier for people to start setting up factories and employment. We've missed the manufacturing bus. It's still not too late. We can still create manufacturing jobs. Good steps are taking place. The labor reforms. Last year, we had the tax cut also, right? You had the agri reforms. Now you have PLI, the production linked incentive. There are issues about it, but that's okay. At least there are good steps being taken up. These are good steps, but we cannot stop here. China did not become China because they changed 3 laws. Okay, it took 3 decades of intense work to become China. We need that continuing process as well. The starting point is our administration is not business friendly at all. In China, it was not a prime minister or even state or province chief ministers who made businesses work. It was 200 mayors across the countryside who were competing with each other to get investments into the respective cities or respective provinces and zones. That decentralization of a business-friendly culture to get people. If you evince an interest to set up a factory, there should be 10 people reaching out to you saying, please come to my place. I will give you the land. I will make it easy for you to start tomorrow. Just employ 20 people for me. That's it. I think that is where we need to head towards. Requires a huge amount of administrative reforms. Hopefully we'll get there. Now, like you said, we are in the crunch where we don't have a choice. Government also seems to be heading towards that direction. Hopefully we come to a place where businesses can create jobs and move ahead.
Absolutely. Some brilliant points put by you, and I would take Mr. Kumar's comments also on this. But before I take them, there are 2 questions that we've got from our audiences. I'll ask each of you to answer one each. The first question has come in for Mr. Kumar. The person wants to ask, I still don't have the person's name. Okay. Arvind Kash has asked this question. He wants to know the credit demand for MSMEs in 2019. Where do you see it? How was it in 2019, and where do you see it going in 2021 and beyond?
Well, frankly, but Arvind, when you look at the credit demand compared to years before, there's no great increase year on year, and that is what is worrying, because essentially the government and the RBI makes it mandatory that you need to have a certain amount of loans which are to be offered to the micro, small, and the farming and the other sectors, primarily what we call as financial inclusion. But if you look at the demand has factually dropped over the last couple of years, and there is very little growth, which actually means there's a slowdown in credit demand. From here onwards, my feeling is once the economy is back on its rails, you will see a certain amount of credit demand again. But I don't expect it to go skyrocket, or it's a simple example. We have the Atmanirbhar loan facility through the ELGS. How much of it is being taken in spite of the fact that 3 lakh crores worth of government guaranteed loans were offered? Only 58% of those loans have been taken factually on the ground. So there's a certain amount of money already available, but there's no people which are willing to take this. So I don't foresee a lot of difference. You might want to give me money, but the problem is I can't use that money to just pay my salaries. It has primarily got to be utilized in some way which can actually get me profits from which I can pay you back. If you're just giving me a loan to just pay salaries, it's not going to help.
Absolutely. There's one more related question that I've got from the audiences. I'll put that question to you, Mr. Narayan. The person wants to know that what has been the credit demand for MSMEs? Oh, no, this one I've already asked. I'll just take one more question that I've got. That's an interesting question that I had. So I really want to take that question. If you could just flash that question. Okay, I have one more question flashing on my screen, but I think this is the same question that I had. What is MSME's role in making in India during the current unprecedented times? That's what the question is, Mr. Narayan.
Very quickly, Sakshi, okay, Mr. Kumar already mentioned that the number of exporters is a shockingly low number. It's below 35,000. Look, the big sectors which employ people are things like ready-made garments, footwear, and so on and so forth. Those are the really heavy employment, heavy kind of sectors. Unfortunately, we've not done well in those sectors. We've done well in things like pharma, in IT services, etc. We've done terribly when it comes to things like ready-made garments and footwear, etc. This is despite China losing a dramatic amount of its share in things like ready-made garments over the years. All that share has gone to countries like Vietnam and Bangladesh. It's not come to us. And here is the problem. It's a twofold problem. One is, of course, our MSMEs are not to scale. The province in China which produces ready-made garments, I forget the name offhand, they have scale. They have large operations which, as my friend Ajit Ranade likes to say, is zip to Zara. They produce threads, they produce yarn, they produce zip, and they have the designers who create material which can go to a Zara, right? So it's a complete ecosystem which exists, which has a connect to a deep sea port, which can then export to the rest of the world, right? We don't have that scale here in India. We still have a bunch of small, MSMEs, and one of the problems of MSMEs is there should be aspiration to grow as well, and the business should be conducive to growing. So here is the point: if we want to grow exports and make in India, let's call it Atmanirbhar Bharat now. If we want that to succeed, it cannot be only resting on the shoulders of MSMEs. It has to be scale. It can be MSMEs which have ambitions to grow into large corporates over the next 10 years, right? And that important scale cannot be underscored. At the moment, to be honest, to answer your question, Make in India has not been a success for the last 5-6 years. Atmanirbhar Bharat has started much better. Labor reforms, tax reforms, PLI, all of that are the steps in the right direction. Lot more needs to be done.
Okay, lots needs to be done. Now, Mr. Kumar, let's take it from what Mr. Narayan was talking about earlier about the job creation in the MSME space, the kind of ease of doing business. They really require business-friendly administration. That is the need of the hour. We all know that 1/5 of our MSMEs are based out of rural areas, and this really also indicates that the role they play in promoting sustainable and inclusive development and generating large-scale employment in rural areas. So what more can the government really do for MSMEs towards job creation, which is really a pain point currently?
Well, excellent. That was a good question. And Anant very clearly talked about a couple of points there. I'd like to add 1 or 2 points. The first is, when we talk about the realigned definition for micro, small, and medium enterprises in India, now you might all be surprised with the fact that 99% of enterprises in India today fall under the ambit of micro, small, and medium enterprise definition. So that leaves you less than factually 0.7% of enterprises which are not MSMEs. And this is also true for all the GST registered businesses. So this is Make in India. These are the companies which are doing Make in India. But the focus is not on the smaller ones here. what has happened with Make in India is, I think in the first couple of phases, it focused on very large businesses and getting them to India, thereafter, offering them sops like land, offering them sops like, electricity duty off, somewhere stamp duty off, somewhere payment of provident fund, so many other sops that various states offered. So that's why what you have today is in EODB, which is the ease of doing business, you have Andhra Pradesh leading because they try to attract a lot of enterprises, especially the large ones. So you had Xiaomi, they set up various business parks around Andhra Pradesh to be able to get on these. My primary question is, when we talk about a small entrepreneur or an entrepreneur, let's say, for example, forget small or micro or medium, this entrepreneur is paying taxes from the day he's setting up this business. And if he's straight, he's paying these taxes year after year, India till today does not have any safety net for it. So tomorrow his business can shut down and he'll be on the road. In fact, in terms of number of suicides committed by entrepreneurs in India, I mean, it's shameful. We have crossed 4 a day. And these are records of the National Crime Record Bureau. We are not able to create a conducive ecosystem for an entrepreneur to go back and tell his family, I'm looking after you, I'm looking after many other families, and I'm going to be safe. Yeah. So that is the first thing. An entrepreneur, whichever segment of society he might come from, could be marginalized, could be a woman, could be from rural areas. What is the safety net that we've been able to evolve or create for it? None. On the other hand, the entire Indian mindset, our media, our entertainment industry, most of the people primarily only talk about the entrepreneur as being a smuggler, being on the wrong side of the law, being, somebody who's pulling a fast one, making money on the side. That is not what entrepreneurs are all about. Entrepreneurs are going to be the future of this country. If we are ever going to look at 100% employment, it is micro, small, medium entrepreneurs who will provide them, not the government, not anybody else. It's high time we realize this. As a country, we need to change our outlook. And if today, tomorrow, your child comes out, I'd rather have your child become an entrepreneur than him just do his MBA or whatever and look out for a job in a multinational. That is not what's going to take us the next decade. And unless we are able to set that correct, your Make in India and everything else is not going to work. It's a very simple mechanism. Because tomorrow, every entrepreneur, how many entrepreneurs are actually pushing their second generation into coming into business? I have a lot of entrepreneurs that I know who don't have any second generation which is wanting to take this business on. They keep on saying that I don't know what to do with it. If you look at columns of buy and sale of businesses, you find more than 11,000 businesses listed today. And these are all small and medium businesses who do not have a second generation person who's wanting to come into that business because they've seen their parents or whoever is the first family entrepreneur go through a lot of turmoil, pain, a lot of issues. That is what we need to correct if we are going to be an entrepreneurial economy, which is the only way out for us as a country.
Absolutely. I agree with you, Mr. Kumar. My father as well is a micro entrepreneur and he doesn't have the second generation coming in. And that's precisely the reason that is he has really seen the problems coming into his business. And that's what I've faced on a personal level as well. So I completely understand what you are saying. And that probably must be true because you are looking at a wider perspective over here. And that must be true for probably a larger base that we are talking about over here. Mr. Narayan, you've been very rightly pointing out that, there is a dire need, just like how Mr. Kumar also said, to provide a safety net for these entrepreneurs who are going to be the future job generators and big employers of the future. So we need to be empowering them at current point in time. Apart from the government, what role do you see for private companies, for funds, for philanthropic and non-profit organizations also to probably step up to support such MSMEs?
It's a great question, Sakshi, and I don't have a straight answer. Then the reason for that is I still think the primary responsibility is with two stakeholders. One is, of course, the entrepreneur himself or herself. You start with that. And the second is the government. Expecting that private entities will come in and do what a government can do is a little tough. Let me try and answer it this way. From the government perspective, I think the following things need to happen, right? One is creating an environment like we've been discussing, where job creation, as Mr. Kumar put, is not a painful activity. It's not somewhere where you have to go to rent-seeking bureaucrats and get approval from 1,000 miles away for doing something. It's decentralized, it is competitive, and it's actually an invitation from local authorities saying, please come and do things for you, do things for the community, and we will help you do that, right? Which many countries, a quick statistic, I read in a Dr. Rakesh Mohan paper, apparently in China, 50% of the bureaucrats are at a local level. In India, it's less than 3%. It's largely secretaries sitting in state capitals or in Delhi, rather than at local entities. Yeah. And the devolution of power in terms of authority, etc., is also that way. Second thing, why the government is important: provision of basic services. Education, healthcare, nutrition. This has to be done by the government. Trying to get the private sector to provide education, I think, is a very, very bad idea. In India, only 45% of the kids go to government schools. This is a shameful statistic. We should have 95% going to government schools, because it's not hard to go to them. Now, we've been terrible ever since independence in providing these basic services. Urbanization we've not been able to do, because things like water, sanitation, we have simply not been able to provide. How can you create an ecosystem for industrialization if your cities are not in a position to support that ecosystem, right? So, and things like education, sanitation, water, healthcare, nutrition, these are basic services which, even if you have to eat grass, we have to provide this, right? Yeah. And unfortunately, we don't put out enough money towards this. We don't put out, and it doesn't become enough of a political, talking point as well to make those changes come about. Unless you invest in that, you will not get the workforce that Mr. Kumar's investee companies require with the right skills to build up businesses. 35% of our children are stunted by the age of 5. Once you have lost that, giving them nutrition until the age of 5, you have lost their brain. They will not go to an IIT or IIM. It's not possible, right? And this is such a shame. If you had given them the right nutrition, God knows what they could have done. So these basic things, again, have to be sorted out at the government level, no questions asked. Where can the private sector be involved? I would start with the financial sector. Okay. First, I'm hoping and praying the government gets out of banking. There's lots of committee reports, including the PGNI committee report, which says get DFS closed, let the banking system and the financial ecosystem be on its own, governed, of course, by the RBI and the government. Okay. Once that happens, I think it's up to the financial services ecosystem to be able to reach out to entrepreneurs and give them a one-stop shop of consultancy, of advice and funds in order to grow businesses. There was a question I saw in the chat around TREDS, the trade financing platform. It's a shame that we have such a lovely platform, but it's not being utilized to the extent it can. You need fintechs, you need people who are willing to innovate and grow platforms such as this. So once you have a fully empowered private or for-profit financial ecosystem, it's up to them to ensure that they actually provide the support required to the ecosystem to grow it. So, look, I think a lot of the onus is still on the entrepreneur and on the government. Entrepreneurs still do well in areas such as pharma and IT services, etc., despite the ecosystem being the way they are. Government has a lot to do. On the private sector, I'm hoping that things like the financial services ecosystem, things like power, which is such a huge mess, and we're kicking the can down the road, eventually becomes a sorted out issue and the private sector takes over. All those things are, basically create an ecosystem which allows for entrepreneurs to flourish.
Absolutely. Mr. Narayan, since you mentioned about that question, we've got that audience question up for you so that you can answer that. So the question is, can non-collateralized and non-resource financing like TREDS really help to reduce the working capital cycle to bring in more efficiency for post-COVID recovery?
Short answer, absolutely yes. These are exactly the kind of formalization and digitization schemes that we hope will take off from here. It's taken a long time to come here. It's not taken off. I wish more banks would adopt this. I wish more corporates would push for this. There is, I'm sorry to say this, but there's also an element of self-serving, priorities against such platforms, because they they effectively, disintermediate banks and financial institutions. They make it cheaper for people to raise funds. So, but I'm sure that's not the overarching case here. I'm sure, given the right kind of opportunities, I'm sure the financial services ecosystem will grow these kind of platforms. And absolutely, things like GST, things like TREADS, I think are the future for formalization and making it easier for entrepreneurs to raise money.
All right. Mr. Kumar, if you could just respond to some of the brilliant points that Mr. Narayan has really put forth in his previous two answers. Apart from that, I also want you to address that as the country really recovers from the economic effects of the pandemic, what do you think are some of the major tailwinds that can really stimulate growth in the MSME sector now?
Okay. Two things I'd like to say before I get to the tailwind part of the question. If you look at developed economies, which have developed MSME sectors or SME sectors as they call it, you have two very important components of this ecosystem. Now, one component are universities. Universities which are research bases, where they incubate companies, incubate ideas, incubate innovations, and very, very important part. So whether it's a Stanford or, all large universities around the world have great incubators which incubate ideas, which incubate entrepreneurs and help them to run their business or start their business. So that's number one. Number two, financial institutions around the world, especially those that are primarily government-led or government subsidiaries around the world, including in China, including in developed economies. Example, BPI France, for example. All of them run accelerator programs. It's not just about giving money and taking the interest and looking after the account. It is about how do you contribute to this entrepreneur's ecosystem, his understanding of business. How do you help him accelerate? You are a bank, you have a lot more resources. How do you help him accelerate that business, grow that business, and create a sustainable model where the business on its own keeps on generating money? Most banks in India, including the public sector banks and private sector banks, normally tend to have a hands-on approach, which is that I gave you money, now you please give me interest every 3 months. If you don't give me interest every third month, you are off. So I'm going to put you in the NPA list. Now that is a very, very sad approach. I request the entire banking community to relook at this. Condition your managers, condition your front office staff to ensure that they support entrepreneurs in the right manner, and also create programs where you can accelerate small businesses. A company which opens, or an enterprise which opens an account with you today, what are you going to actually do to enable him over the next 5, 8, 10 years? Very, very important components of this. Third thing that we were talking about, that you asked me, tailwinds. I sincerely feel the entire world is looking at India today. And the entire world is looking at solutions from India. And my feeling is that our services sector is going to grow exponentially. Okay. And nothing to stop it. Whatever the government might do is not going to be able to stop them from growing. So that's the one side. On the other side, in terms of manufacturing and all, my feeling is a lot more enterprises from around the world want to come to India, and they are only looking at partners in India. They are looking at enterprises which are, again, family-owned, entrepreneur-led, which are small, manageable, which they can tie up with and ally with. And we need to somehow get both of these together. And we've had a certain amount of success with almost 8 enterprises coming to India in the last 3 or 4 months, and we are expecting this sort of a trend to move much farther when it comes to looking at maybe the top 10,000 or 12,000 enterprises in India, which have the potential to grow into very large enterprises. And the moment you are able to see something like that, what you're able to see is, in the supply chain will automatically get created. A lot more enterprises will get a lot more work. So those are the things that we are seeing. And the other very important thing I am foreseeing, which is that a lot of Indian enterprises are going to look at international markets from the point of view of manufacturing there or packaging there and spreading, being born in India, but having enterprises everywhere else around the world. after the startup boom, I think that is what we are yet to see, but we're going to see that very soon. You'll have a lot of Indian entrepreneurs go outside India and set up enterprises.
All right. So far, we've actually talked about the pace of recovery from COVID-19, the extent of any permanent damage, if any, and the nature of the policy response that we are already seeing. But let's now turn focus on the economic and investment outlook going forward from here. So I want both of you to really share your thoughts on as to what will really drive growth in the post-COVID era. So, Mr. Narayan, if you could just help us understand about the investments bit in India, they are at still a sticky point. What are the key challenges for foreign investors coming into India, and how do we overcome them? What would be your view as far as future global investment outlook is concerned?
Well, I'll just start by endorsing what Mr. Kumar said about tailwinds for in the form of foreign investors, right? I think it was yesterday that China raised a sovereign bond in Europe, 4 billion euros worth of bonds at minus 0.15%. Okay, I checked the numbers today morning. $17 trillion worth of sovereign bonds are yielding negative interest rates right now. The fact is, with so much of money being flooded by central banks around the world, the Federal Reserve, the ECB, the BOJ, you name it, right? There is money sloshing everywhere. Why is our stock market at close to record highs? Because you have FIs now pouring in money, not knowing what to do with the money, right? So Absolutely. There is enough and more money chasing yields everywhere. They are willing to take on risk. And India, for all of our warts and everything, I can tell you, I speak to a lot of global investors. They love us. And sometimes I get the feeling they love us more than we love ourselves, right? So they don't see ourselves. They really love us. And that's a huge goodwill that we've got to take advantage of, okay? They genuinely think that we have a future and they believe in our story and they are willing to put in money here. They need some help in terms of the overall ecosystem. Now, I'll tell you what concerns global investors when they come to India, okay? One is, one thing which is happening around this formalization. Global investors go by the letter of the law. Okay, you cannot show a particular clause to why were our labor laws so difficult for global investors to understand? When you had these 44 odd, codes and 27,000 odd compliances, and many of which were actually jailable compliances, you can't tell the global investor, listen, ye sab chalta hai, this is nothing, don't worry about it.
This can be changed.
That they can't understand that stuff, right? So, which is why that formalization part is extremely important. Second thing is, they're really flummoxed by our judicial processes. Contract enforcement is a huge pain. The fact that you can have this Vodafone thing come, as a shock right now, the fact that you can have the banking, the interest on interest drag on for so long, God knows what's going to happen out of it. People don't understand that, right? Yeah. Third is policy stability. Okay, the fact that we can impose retrospective taxes on Vodafone by changing the laws and because we didn't like their faces. Yeah. It blows their mind. The fact that you can change the laws against Walmart after they've completed a $16 billion takeover of Flipkart. Again, it tells, what the hell is this? So they're looking for stability. They're looking for, please don't give us shocks, right? Now, the good news is, I think, given the flood of money lying around and the fact that we seem to be making the right changes with the labor law changes, with the, PLIs, with the lower tax rates, we are becoming a lot more welcoming. I think that's a huge positive for us. Besides the fun part, the world is aging. Even China is aging. The other big positive for us, one is, of course, there is this US-China element. There is this Japan, Australia, US, India, China against China element. People therefore want to diversify away from China. China has become the factory of the world, and that kind of worries a lot of people, including people in Europe now, right? So that's an opportunity for countries like us, Vietnam and Indonesia, etc., right? The second part is China itself is trying to diversify. People don't get this, but they have this whole plan of China 2025. They want to up their game in terms of going up the technology value chain, etc. They don't want to do basic manufacturing with hordes of factory workers around them. They actually want to upgrade that. So they are vacating a space willingly in many areas, which are labor and contract heavy, right? They're saying, please take it. So on both counts, again, there is a huge tailwind for us. And look, the long story short is this. I think opportunities are there. We are a small bunch of people. I've worked in 12 countries. I can tell you, I haven't seen fire in the belly anywhere as I've seen in our own country. Okay, you're hearing this from an unbiased Indian, but nevertheless, I think we genuinely have it in us. A lot of tailwinds which are in our favor. The constraints are self-imposed. the fact that we've made it difficult for doing businesses, the fact that our authorities treat us as if they're doing a favor to us by allowing us to set up a
Right.
factory and employ people. These are self-imposed, our judicial processes, our policy processes. These are our own self-imposed constraints. Third generation reforms, I think, are going to start right now, which will make it easier for us to remove these constraints. Once that happens, I think our future will be bright.
Absolutely. Mr. Kumar, why don't you come in on this and tell us which business segments are foreign investors probably bullish right now? Are you seeing that they want to invest in India? And do you think the interest is also rising post the pandemic, just like how Mr. Narayan pointed out, when more and more countries are trying to rebuild and restore the supply chains and not be dependent on just one nation?
Well, it's actually, if you look at primarily the one biggest thing that India has today, it is basically our demographic dividend. We have the youngest population in the world, and that's all available for you to train, available for you to hire, and at rates we all know. So essentially, given the fact that you have an available workforce, which is there, any and all sorts of stuff. I've been looking at agro processing, huge amount of interest when it comes to, especially after the farm bills. A lot of that is going to open up now. You're going to have people coming into infrastructure there. You're going to have people coming into processing there. What I find is a lot of people who are primarily looking at India also as a market, not only as a base for manufacturing or cheap labor or everything else around it. And the fact that what Anand also talked about, when you look at the resilience of Indians vis-a-vis other business communities around the world, we are an extremely resilient community. And that is what people around the world, businessmen around the world see in us. And they long to work with us. They long to look at what can they do together with us. And I've seen a number of examples of this. Now, the only fear that most of the people that they have is that, this industry is a state subject. So each state has its own rules. Each state can have very different rules. So, for example, if you were to set up a business in India, and today if you have 4 branches, each branch has a separate labor register, separate compliances. Now, it's high time we get over all this, apart from the factors that Anand mentioned. And my feeling is every manufacturing sector that we are talking about, especially pharma, agro-processing, electronics, you have a huge amount of scope in India. And everybody from these sectors are looking at it. Apart from the, what I talked about, labor-intensive sectors. We have, whether it's the Czech, whether it's the Polish, all the European nations, they are looking at coming to India for the entire cultural-based, craft-based stuff that we make in India. They want to be a part of it. They want to utilize the workforce. They want to use our knowledge, ancient knowledge, which has been coming from generation to generation. All of this excites them. And I can tell you, apart from the modern manufacturing sectors, even our traditional sectors are going to be completely mechanized by collaborations with international companies that want to come to India. And we have quite a few of them already here.
Absolutely. I'll just take the last question now, much as I would want to actually continue to listening to both of you because of the kind of interesting insights that you're sharing with all our viewers as well today. But just the last question, because the time will not permit us to go for much further from here. Mr. Narayan, first to you. The pandemic, we all know, has undoubtedly led to a whole lot of uncertainty. But now, even as we see slowly some signs of recovery, what would be the key enablers for India to really return to the sustained growth rates going forward from here?
It's a summary of all that we've discussed, Sakshi. So look, we've taken a body blow through this crisis. Make no mistake.
Yeah.
Okay. So while the GDP numbers will show better to start with, remember that the first cut GDP prints will not incorporate the pain in the MSME businesses. Okay, so that will come in eventually. Eventually, we might still see for this fiscal year a degrowth, a contraction of about 10% of percentage points, which is very, very bad. Okay, it's a big hit to a already soft economy. Okay, what does that mean? There is hardship in businesses. There's hardship in households. We also have a very funny problem of inflation, despite the fact that GDP is contracting the way it is. We will have a large fiscal deficit because the government has no choice but to spend at this point in time, and it's not collecting taxes. In many ways, our macroeconomics will not look great. But the point is, we can grow from here. What has happened has happened. Our future is still bright if we get our act together. The first good steps have been taken, but a lot more needs to be done at individual level, at institutional level, and at a government level. Okay, let's start with the government. The easiest, as an armchair professor, I like beating up the government. So let me start with the government first. The starting points is what we discussed. One is the ease of creating jobs and output. Eventually, all our macroeconomic problems, the only solution is jobs, output, and productivity. There is no other solution. Whether it's fiscal deficit, inflation, we just need this jobs and output. Create jobs and output as if that's the only goal that you're facing. Make it easier for entrepreneurs to create jobs. Invite people, give them a massage on their back if it helps them create jobs. Okay, do whatever is required to help create jobs. Alongside that, a lot of other things need to happen. Our financial services ecosystem is in no position to fund our growth and job creation aspirations. Let's face it, right? So there's a big overall require out there. Our credit to GDP ratio at 50% is a shame. China is at 200% plus. We have a big way to go in increasing the credit which goes to all these entrepreneurs. A lot of changes need to happen. Cleaning up the banking system, taking the knock once and for all, getting rid of the DFS and giving independent people the charge of the banking and financial ecosystem. That needs to be done. Second is lots of other niggling issues like the power sector, real estate, telecom, airline and shipping. We have chronic stresses in these sectors. We are kicking the can down the road. We are pretending these issues don't exist. Bite the bullet, get the stakeholders into one room, lock the room, throw the key away, don't open it until they have a solution for each of these sectors. That needs to be done as well. So, and the last bit, even if you have to eat grass, put money into education, put money into nutrition, into healthcare, into water, sanitation, public services, urban essentials. That's something that we have to focus on if we want to actually foster growth and jobs in this country. Okay, for businesses, look, this is if you have survived already, the sky is the limit. Okay, you are smart people. Figure out what business is going to be looking like. The way in which people buy, sell, transact is all going to change. If you're the first off the block, sky's the limit. Formalize yourself. Become part of the formal economy. Take expertise from abroad. There's a lot of funding available from abroad as well. The government is keen to make those changes now. Use the government, use financial institutions, use the foreign money and expertise, and be aspirational and grow and create jobs in this country. Lots of sectors which will do well. Things like pharma, IT, anyway are our strengths. We will do well there. Sectors where we've been import dependent, electronics, plastics, chemicals, etc. There again, there's a lot of opportunities available. Plus, like Mr. Kumar mentioned, areas like universities, research, huge amount of areas, which will get opened up. The new education policy talks about allowing foreign, universities to open in India.
Yeah.
I think the sky's the limit. And the beauty is very few countries have a young population like Mr. Kumar mentioned, which is capable of creating jobs. The world is going to depend upon us for the next 20, 30 years at least to create jobs, to create output, presuming that they don't create robots to replace all of us. So in interim, we have a huge opportunity. What has happened has happened. Up to us now to create and chart our own path.
Absolutely. Mr. Kumar, your closing thoughts.
Well, some quick points. I was just noting down what all Anant has left out. So he did not all the stuff. But very important, in terms of export promotion, I'll give you a very small example. We're competing here with China, with South Korea, with Vietnam, Indonesia, and all these countries. And you look at our budgets and our schemes for export promotion. We have absolutely very, very little, meager, I would say, compared to what everybody else is doing. We are not promoting enough. We are not promoting Indian exports enough around the world. Very, very simple. Wherever you go to trade, exposed to places where China is promoting themselves, you find 3,000 square meters of China, and you find 30 square meters of India. So export promotion. Our basic embassies, they are the front ends for exports. They need to be empowered, or we need to have an export promotion agency which is just going to do that job, which will work with locals around the world in those countries, not trying to sell automotive equipment based in Pune from a factory in Pune to somebody in Detroit. It's not going to work. You need to be in Detroit to promote. So number one. Number two, focus on labor-intensive experts. Unless you are having a focus and equating that with the employment that it's creating, as far as exports are concerned, you won't be in a situation like South Korea, for example, which primarily focused on labor-intensive exports. That's how you have per capita GDP, which grew exponentially. Third, digital empowerment. Digital empowerment of each type of community, whether it is entrepreneurs, whether it is students, whether it's your education system, whether it is the government, everything needs to be digitally empowered right now. There should be no room for physical anything, whether it's your inspector coming to visit your or inspect your premises or your labor compliance or anything of that sort. Even your education should be completely digital to whatever extent possible. And the last most important thing that I feel, it's high time that India put in place an employment incentive mechanism. What is it that the entrepreneur is finally going to get out of the entire heartburn that he does? And he's very proud that he's done a lot of work. He's employed a lot of people. But what is the government doing to, support him in that? That is the least that the government can do. Rest, if the government leaves all the entrepreneurs alone, I'm sure they will survive.
Okay, points taken. All right, let's wrap it up at that note. Thank you very much, Mr. Vinod Kumar, and thank you very much, Mr. Anand Narayan, for sharing these thought-provoking insights with us. For all the audiences, to learn more or to ask more questions specific to City Business, you can write to bizsuccess@city.com. Well, to sum it up, the pandemic has definitely sounded a clarion call to accelerate the targeted reforms that the government needs to do, which can significantly shore up economic fundamentals by also enabling greater productivity and growth. And as we search to really live in a post-COVID-19 world, it is especially crucial to really facilitate our MSMEs, our micro, small, and medium entrepreneurs in their quest to effectively tackle the vulnerabilities such as these financial stress, uncertain demand, dispersed workforce, and downbeat export market, as both of our panelists have really put out very, very brilliantly. After all, a resilient MSME sector will definitely and automatically translate into a sound economic future for the country. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sakshi. Pleasure, Mr. Kumar.
Thank you.
I don't, शाम को मैं नहीं हूँ. Thanks, Sakshi.